Good morning, everyone. It's a real pleasure for me to be here today, and I want to say a thank you to our partners at the Brookfield Institute for all their efforts to organize this event. We've had such a phenomenal morning hearing from technology experts, getting the history on AI, getting some great application areas, some great examples and case studies. And this session now is really starting to move into the policy implications of AI. And so I'm going to start by giving a little bit of background on Canada's position in AI, why we are such leaders in this space, how we got to be such great leaders globally in AI research and innovation, and then talk about some of the policy questions that we're starting to address and how we're about to do those. So really, Canada has a few advantages when it comes to our AI ecosystem, and we have a really, really long history of groundbreaking and pioneering research in AI. And much of that research was led by these three individuals. So these are three of our research leaders in AI across the country. On the top left is Yoshua Bengio. He's a professor at the University of Montreal. In the middle, you've seen this man several times already this morning, Professor Jeff Hinton here at the University of Toronto. And the bottom right is Professor Richard Sutton, who's based at the University of Edmonton. So these individuals and their colleagues and students and research teams have been working for 20 years and more in some cases in really pioneering some of the groundbreaking research that we've seen in the field of AI that now is starting to have its applications, but they've been working on these areas for a long time, and they truly have been world leading in their research. So we have these three clusters of excellence really that have formed around these great research leaders, and that is one of Canada's key advantages in the AI system. Another key advantage that Canada has in our AI ecosystem is the diversity of the ecosystem, and I think that's a key advantage of Canadian society in general, but it applies to the AI ecosystem as well. This figure was created by our colleagues at Element AI, and they published it about a year ago, so it's already completely out of date considering how quickly this field is moving. But really what it's showing is the various players within the AI ecosystem across Canada and in particular centers. So in the center, we've got some of the incubators, accelerators, venture capital funds that are supporting the growth of the AI ecosystem in Canada. The first circle coming out from the center are the academic research institutes and research labs around the country, and you can see that we're starting to cluster them in Toronto, in Edmonton, in Montreal, also in Vancouver and Waterloo. And when you get to the outermost circle, that's when you see the startup ecosystem. And there are hundreds and hundreds of burgeoning and growing startups across Canada, concentrated truly in those three major centers, but in lots of other cities as well, that are starting to develop really innovative products and services that leverage AI and in particularly deep learning. I think what's really been fascinating over the last 18 months is that we're also starting to see, of course, really deep interest from large multinational companies in the Canadian ecosystem. And so companies like Google and Facebook and Amazon are now starting to set up research labs, AI research labs within Canada. And that's a true testament to our strength, our talent, and our diversity as well. Another huge advantage that Canada has truly is the level of talent, the expertise of the talent that we have in this country, and the sheer numbers. Because of the early pioneers who have developed and trained dozens and dozens of graduate students who have attracted further researchers to come and join their research clusters, in Canada we now have over 1,100 active PhD researchers in AI. It's quite an astonishing number. Again, this was a study that Element AI did, and they published this one in February of this year. It's not a very scientific study. They used primarily LinkedIn data, but what they looked at were the number of active AI PhD researchers around the world, and they found there are 2,200 around the world, 22,000, I'm sorry, around the world. Primarily concentrated in the US, with the UK coming in second at about 1,900 and Canada having just over 1,100. What's interesting, of course, is that Canada is about 10 times smaller than the US. So if you look at our numbers per capita, we're clearly punching above our weight. The authors, of course, also noted that China is underrepresented in the study. So we don't have a great handle on what's happening in China, the number and the level of activity. We do know that it is a strategic priority for the government, and they're investing incredibly heavily. So Canada has a great advantage. We compete incredibly well against our colleagues in the G7, and we have to certainly keep an eye on our competitors around the world. So all of these things have come together to create an incredibly strong ecosystem in Canadian AI research and innovation. But how did we actually get to that point? And it's really, almost a 30-year story. And it goes back, I would say, to 1983. So CIFAR is the organization that I'm very proud to now represent. And one of the very first research programs, in fact, the first research program that CIFAR launched in 1983 was called Artificial Intelligence, Robotics, and Society. So we had huge foresight that this was going to be a really important area of research, and that it was critical to bring together leading thinkers from around the world to start to tackle some of these issues, even in 1983. So CIFAR has been supporting this research for many, many years, and in particular, where we've seen huge impact of our investment of resources and time and energy, have been since 2004, when we launched a program called Learning in Machines and Brains. This program was directed by Jeffrey Hinton for about 10 years, and it really, at the time, was a very high-risk research program. These concepts were unfounded. We didn't have the data to really be able to leverage the approaches around deep learning. We didn't have the hardware to be able to leverage the approaches around deep learning. It was truly fundamental research. But CIFAR also saw that there was a potential for huge reward. And so we, with Jeff's leadership, we convened a group of researchers from around the world to start to tackle some of these issues. And many of the breakthroughs that we heard about early this morning from Gimo, from Costa, from Graham, around computer vision, image recognition, natural language processing, many of those breakthroughs are a result really of the now 14 years of work that the Learning in Machines and Brains program has done over the course of its history. So we're very proud to be the early adopters and early supporters of AI research in Canada and really around the world. And so the result of all of the great expertise in Canada, the great activity that we have in Canada, CIFAR's leadership in this space, led to last year the federal government announcing a $125 million pan-Canadian AI strategy. And they asked CIFAR to be the lead in implementing that strategy. And I started in January as the executive director. And so my colleagues at CIFAR have been working very, very hard, and I have been with our partners at the 3 AI institutes across the country. And so really the first goal of the strategy was, in fact, to establish 3 really strong centers of excellence in AI research, building on the foundations that are already there. And so over the course of the last year, we've established AMI, which is the Alberta Machine Intelligence Institute in Edmonton, MILA, which is they just go by MILA these days, which is in Montreal and led by Yoshua Bengio, and the Vector Institute here in Toronto in this building, and Alan will speak to that very shortly. So that was a really fundamental aspect of the strategy, and CIFAR is working hand in hand with these 3 institutes in order to enable and support the objectives of the strategy. Second goal of the strategy is really to bring some of the best minds in AI from around the world to Canada. We want to reverse the brain drain and actually have a brain gain. So in some cases, this is repatriating great Canadian researchers who have spread around the globe, but also recruiting great researchers from other countries to come to Canada, join the institutes, and help to drive their research missions. Thirdly, a critical goal of the strategy is to continue to develop a really large pool of outstanding AI talent. We want to be training the next generation of graduate students, postdocs, undergraduate students even, many, many young people who have skills, expertise, and understand the applications of machine learning and deep learning technologies. And that's basically so that those individuals can go and have jobs in some of the great companies that are either forming or coming to Canada and help to drive our economy forward, and Canada can continue to be a leader in this space. Fostering collaboration across the country is also a critical part of the strategy. It's a big country, and it's really, really hard to support collaborative research across such large geography. And so as part of the program, we're building a series of activities that will bring researchers and students together across the country. And then finally, I think an essential feature of the Pan-Canadian AI strategy is to develop Canada's position as a thought leader on the ethical, social, policy, and economic implications of AI. And that's really what we're talking about today, are the policy implications of AI. And it's a really important area. Of course, we've talked a lot this morning about the development of AI technology and what are all of its possible uses. But what are the implications of those technologies, and how will they affect society? We hear a lot in the media about jobs and killer robots, and there's a lot of myths out there that need to be dispelled. But we also seriously need to look at what are the ethical, social, legal, etc. implications of AI. And so over the last few years, couple of years really, we've seen a huge proliferation of the number of organizations, institutes, and groups that are starting to look at the societal implications of AI, and this is just a few of them. Some of them are based at universities around the world. We have scientific and scholarly societies like the IEEE or the Royal Society in the UK starting to look at the ethical and social implications of AI. The private sector, of course, is looking at those issues as well through, for example, the Partnership on AI, and you can see the members here. Not-for-profit organizations like CIFAR and like OpenAI are starting to look at the societal implications, and governments around the world are starting to ask the questions of what does it mean for our governments, our delivery of services to our citizens, and what does AI mean to society at large. And so, in the CIFAR AI and Society program, we're also tackling many of those issues. So we want to certainly be looking at the ethics. We want to be looking at policy questions, regulation. We want to be looking at the issues around IP and across many different application areas. So we've talked about transportation with autonomous vehicles. We've talked about the justice system, but of course health is another huge area where policy implications are really going to be important, as is climate, energy, etc. And so really, actually, I would say today marks, in some ways, the inaugural event of the AI and Society and program. And I want to call out my colleague, Brent Barron, who's at the back of the room. Brent's here. Probably many of you know Brent. So Brent is our Director of Public Policy at CIFAR, and he's really leading the AI and Society program. And when we look at the policy questions around AI, we've sort of articulated three really critical dimensions. We want to make sure that we're talking about and thinking about and looking at AI innovation policy. That is, what are the policy questions around the actual AI research, the commercialization of that research, in order to facilitate the adoption of these technologies. We want to look at AI for transformation. This is particularly of interest to different levels of government. They want to try to understand how can governments use AI for policy development, but also to develop and reinvent the services that government provides to our citizens. And then, of course, we have to look at the broader societal implications, responding actually to the AI technologies themselves, those social, legal, economic, and ethical questions. And so that's the framework that we're approaching with the AI and Society program. And we're starting by launching sort of two main streams of activity. So one is exactly what we're here to do today. We're calling it our Policy Labs on AI and Society, and we've been really fortunate to partner with the Brookfield Institute to launch today's event, and we'll be running, in fact, a series of events just like this across the country. The idea is to really bring together innovators and thinkers from different levels of government, from the not-for-profit sector, even from the private sector, to start to think about some of these questions and start to deliver some recommendations and ideas about how we tackle the challenges and how we can move them forward. And then the second major stream of activity is a call for workshops. So this is an open call to researchers around the world to propose ideas for really critical aspects of societal questions around AI. And CIFAR will convene researchers from around the world to come together to tackle a particular question. And again, we hope to have some pretty significant outcomes from those workshops and meetings and be able to provide advice and recommendations to governments on how to move forward. So that's the sort of introduction to the policy questions around AI in society. And one of the things that I wanted to draw to everybody's attention here, as I've been learning a lot about AI, not just the technological side, but also the societal side, I wanted to draw your attention to a website called Canada.ai. And Graham's not here, unfortunately, he had to step out, but Graham is one of the key supporters of this platform. It was launched in January of this year, and it's really a phenomenal repository of all of the things that are happening in the Canadian AI scene. I know that I am completely bombarded with news, ideas, events around Canadian AI, but this is a one-stop shop to understand what's happening and what's new in the Canadian AI scene. And particularly this morning, our president, Alan Bernstein, showed me a new tool that the website has just launched, which highlights the timeline of Canadian AI research development and technology development. So I wanted to point that out to you as an excellent resource as well.